Great. So while they're just setting up the next session, let me whet your appetite with the panelists that I'm going to have for you. So this session, as you can see, is really trying to answer the question, can pay TV operators remain relevant in the business? So we have two operators, one from the Netherlands, KPN, and one from the UK, TalkTalk. So Alejandro and Sanga. Then we have Thijs from Comcast Meteorological. You can argue he's an operator as well, really, in that he's owned by Comcast, but he's in the business of keeping operators relevant. Please take seats. He's in the business of keeping operators relevant by providing with a framework for apps through their solution. And then lastly, we have a content owner and provider of content services with Heather at Horse and Country. So let's kick off with the operators, and I conveniently have the two of them here side by side. So how are you going to remain relevant in this world where streaming is really taking over? You know, the consumers out there, they don't really need you anymore, do they?
Well, I don't quite agree. So
come on, convince us.
So of course, this is a challenging industry. So we see everybody has to reinvent themselves, and so do we, of course. I think the pay TV operators are still relevant, and I see three main reasons for that. I would say first one is footprint. So OTT partners know that we have already a footprint. So when they enter the Dutch market, they know they can partner with us and they can reach millions of eyeballs. And secondly, I would say carrier billing and bundles. So in this world of so many OTT players, I think it's good for a consumer to have a clear overview of the services they are subscribing to. And that they can also easily subscribe and unsubscribe to different services, not having to enter every time all their credit card details, just entering the PIN code of their TV subscription, and there you go. And last but not least, I would say the durable relation we have with a customer.
Okay.
So we are not selling a device where you can watch TV, we are selling a service.
Yep.
So we look at maintaining a long-term relationship with the customer. When they have a problem with their broadband, with a pay TV, they know where to find us, and we are happy to support them and to enable them in their enjoyment of the content.
Fantastic. Sanga, at TalkTalk, you have definitely been reinventing yourselves, right?
Absolutely. I think we've seen as with our heritage as being a value connectivity provider that increasingly customers are looking to save money, particularly in these very challenging times. And so I think the opportunity is really to be that aggregator of a variety of video services and make it easy for customers to discover new content, to switch between providers as necessary with low friction, and also think about the overall household spend on communication and entertainment and help customers save money through getting a really ultra reliable connection into the home, get the Wi-Fi right into the home, and then of course, help the customer find the right bouquet of content that works for them. So we've very much been on that pivot, moving away from traditional pay TV aggregation much more to this super aggregator model where as an independent European telco, we can bring in providers, whether some of the larger partners we have, such as Sky and Netflix, through to some of the smaller providers where we look to give them the opportunity to be discovered by our customer base.
Heather, as a content owner, as a provider of channels and apps, do you still need these guys to distribute what you have?
Do we still need them? I'm dialing into your question there quite specifically. I think it's a part of the revenue mix for us, and it's part of our funnel. So as a producer of specialist content, I mean, we produce a tremendous amount of live content, 2 linear channels, and lots of on-demand content for people who live their lives with horses and are fans of equestrian sport and practitioners of equestrian sport. So we have pivoted ourselves over the last couple of years to be a multi-platform OTT proposition with a subscription model really at our heart. And now we're at a point from having previously been a pay TV channel where 2/3 of our revenue comes from subscription sources. So I think it's fair to say that that's done. We've turned the corner. However, we haven't thrown the baby out with the bathwater. And the fact that we came from a culture of producing channels means that we do still produce 2 channels. One of them is a free channel that we distribute on FAST platforms. And that's a great piece of our funnel because it gives us the opportunity to get in front of people who perhaps otherwise wouldn't come across us. And we also still have a premium channel that we distribute to pay TV operators. And that's also a good part of our business and is a point of differentiation for us also in rights discussions. So is it something that we need? Well, our business really has moved on in quite a significant way, but it's a good part of our revenue mix. It's a good part of our customer funnel. And so it's something that, yes, we'd like to keep for as long as that remains relevant for both parties.
So the fundamental question, the homework question, Thijs, you're in the business of helping these guys remain relevant, right?
Yep. Yeah, and the interesting thing is it has a couple of different angles, right? Because what do you need or what do you face when you want to become a super aggregator? On the one hand side, you don't know what content is relevant to who, right? The technical onboarding of apps is a challenge, and it's a very dynamic market. So you need to, I would say, use that traditional pay TV platform, which is definitely not suitable to onboard apps and do it in a very quick pace. Get that right. Secondly, interesting research pointed out that, in the United States, for example, the average household together spends over 600 million minutes per evening to find content. So how to onboard all that content that serves all the specific niche target groups is one. But actually, how do you also integrate that into a seamless experience, right? Leveraging search and discovery, ensuring that there's one bill at the end of the month, and making sure that...
600 minutes over what period? Not every night, right?
Per night. 600 million minutes, yeah. In average, people, the total is spending 600 million minutes each night to find content.
Relevant. What is it for an individual, a household?
I don't know, I guess.
Because it's an irrelevant number otherwise, isn't it?
It's
irrelevant number.
Well, in that sense, it at least shows that the complexity, when you start onboarding, let's say, more apps and OTT content, the complexity for the end consumer grows. The time they need in order to find the relevant content is becoming more and more of an issue.
Yeah.
Right? So how do we help operators becoming super aggregators? On the one hand side, how do you onboard your app efficiently in an environment that is very, very challenging? And secondly, how do you help that content to be surfaced in one overall experience? And thirdly, how do you leverage the things that Alejandro said, like one remote, right? One search and discovery method, one bill.
Heather, you've got one of their apps, right? In the US market?
We do. We have a meteorological app, which is currently the only platform that it's on is Comcast's Xfinity and Flex. I suppose it's 2 Comcast platforms in the US.
Is it working for you?
Yeah, it is. It's working for us. At the moment, it's a little hard to actually tell what additional uptake we're getting there because it's not an in-app purchase journey at this time. But that's something that I think we will move to. And perhaps that's, another kind of relevant point here from looking at it from our point of view is just being on any kind of platform, and that's not a direct-to-consumer type of experience. There's a trade-off. okay, because you're going to be giving up margin and you're going to be giving up control of your own data, your customer data. So there needs to be some countervailing benefit, but being at multiple consumer touch points, minimizing the friction in the subscription journey, as Alejandro said, all of the, and being able to perhaps reach people who through serendipity will find you. These are all positive things. So there is a little bit of a trade-off in that, coexistence.
So give us a little bit of an insight there. How much margin do you give up by going with one of these guys versus going yourself direct?
Oh, well, I mean, it depends. Obviously, some partners have bigger appetites than others, shall we say. But even if you're running a direct-to-consumer experience, you're probably going to be giving up, 3 or 4% in your just on Stripe or PayPal or whatever it is. And then also you have to pay the VAT on your revenue. Typically, the margin going to the partner, depending on the deal, will vary between 20 and 50%. So yeah, it's obviously a consideration. And then, we find that on different platforms, you actually get different cohorts. People behave in different ways. So, we think about the whole thing as being a funnel.
Yeah.
We have super fans. We have people who pay us £150 a year because they want to watch lots of competitions. They want to be able to get clips of their own rounds. They want to be able to watch lots of training and advice content. And we love those people, but we need to be able to, address a wider audience in order to be able to bring those people into our world.
Asanga, you took this decision to, in your words, pivot completely away from a traditional, certainly provider of paid channel model of pay TV. And so you're in the position now where you're you are a super aggregator, right? Give us an idea of the thinking behind that process. What was the calculation? What led you to that decision?
Well, first and foremost, I think listening to our customers, we definitely saw that, and Maria talked about it earlier, that they are definitely looking to have more flexibility in how they consume content and not necessarily be locked in. The second factor is just some of the enablers, the technology enablers. Now with the quality of the streaming applications, the video quality, the overall experience. And thirdly, I think really our ability now to sort of bring on people, bring on partners, integrate the billing, make that digital experience simpler for customers has actually been very helpful. And one of the promising things I think we're seeing in that pivot is with our large customer base, so we have 2.4 million fibre customers, about 4.2 million overall customers in the United Kingdom, we're also able to help customers who aren't necessarily as familiar with direct relationships with content providers. We're able to make that onboarding simpler. And then on top of that, if you look at the overall household spend, we can save the money. So one of the things we've done this year, working with Netflix, is to do a hard bundle with Netflix, so Netflix and fibre. And we've been really encouraged by that. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but particularly for new to OTT customers, it provides a way of really saving money. Other customers will wish to add to bill or go directly with those consumers, and I think we're sanguine about that because ultimately, video for us is about helping customers to discover the right entertainment, champion the public service broadcasters, but ultimately, we're a broadband business, and we want to make customers' digital lives simpler. So, it's a pivot, though we're not rejecting the content that customers love. We are simply moving towards newer access methods and integrated billing.
Would you accept, in my chat with Rolf earlier, the idea of it being de-risking of the business, is that an important concept for you?
No, not necessarily de-risking the business. I think we see it very much as we have a role to play in the market. I think certain customers are well served by providers that major on, on aggregation and delivery methods that are more established. I think where we come in as a value provider is a sweet spot around customers are thinking, wow, I'm spending 40, 50 pounds a month on my entertainment. My gas bills have gone up loads. I need to save money. We're not trying to replicate the incumbent experience. We're saying, look, actually as a customer, if you want to, you can take a bouquet of content. It might be Netflix, a lot of the PSB content that we have on our UV platform, and you know what, you can pick and choose, and that may not be for everybody, but we think that there is a great opportunity to save customers money, and so that's why we moved that way.
Alejandro, what about you? Is it about de-risking the business?
Yeah, well, I kind of agree with Hasanga on that point. So so it's following the customer demands, let's say. So we try to meet their demands by onboarding apps. In that sense, I agree with what Thijs also said before about the onboarding of apps. So we are working together with Metrological and Thijs on the Lightning framework. It's an excellent way to onboard apps in a quickly way, and also on more devices than the newest one. So when we talk about onboarding apps, most people think, yeah, I'm going to integrate the apps on my newest device, but we tend to forget the older devices that many hundreds of thousands of customers have at their homes.
So you've got to deal with all that legacy
We
stuff.
have to deal with that as well in order to save capex, of course, because we are not going to swap set-top box for everyone. So we are working together with Metrological on the Lightning framework, on developing apps on that framework, which allows us to extend the life cycle of our hardware on the customer premises.
Thijs, I mean, historically that, the whole RDK meteorological thing has been focused, let's say, at the higher end of the operator landscape. And, there's this little company, Google, that has mopped up the smaller operators, shall we say. Is that picture changing?
No, I would say, in general, we are supporting basically operators and not necessarily, only going for the huge ones or the big ones. I guess what we look at is, the operators like Alejandro said, which are looking to provide reach to basically the content partners that they work with, and the biggest reach is still on legacy. So not a sort of a kind of a preference, right, for only going for the big and the huge ones. On the other hand side, let's be honest, if we want to provide a relevant, platform or alternative to content providers, right, because at the end of the day, we are kind of at the intersection, I would say, of pay TV operators on the one hand side, and on the other hand side, helping also the content providers to build reach. It is relevant to look at, which partnerships with which operators are, actually bringing in those eyeballs. Now, one of the other things, because you also mentioned RDK, in our history, we have tried to contribute also a lot of technologies to the market, because we saw that we needed to enable both the operators as well as the content providers to solve a problem. And that problem is actually what I earlier mentioned. You're talking about highly constrained devices, and how can you actually make it easy for content providers to onboard an app. Right? We all talk about super aggregation and et cetera, but before we do that, we have a problem to solve, right? And the problem to solve is, if your set-top box doesn't have a lot of memory, right? It basically runs on older technology. How do you create a sort of a framework that actually enables content providers to much more easily work with you? That's key, because if you want to gain as much eyeballs as you want from a content provider perspective, right? You don't want to end up in a sort of a multi-year plus exercise per operator to just get your app up and running, and then you need to do your billing integration, then you need to do right? Your your search and discovery right. So the point is a bit, we have invested a lot in these open source technologies. Lightning is basically the current name of the app framework that actually have been donated to the open source. Because one other philosophy is, if you want to have these enablers accepted in the industry, then don't put a license model on it. Just make sure that everyone is able to use Lightning and to use Lightning SDK, right, to onboard their app more easily, enable also the operator to more easily make sure that the app navigation is consistent with all the other apps that run on your set-top box. It's basically tapping into your operator billing, etc., etc., etc. So yes, we have been contributing, but the vision behind was we first need to enable the industry, and then you can start growing your platform. Now, a last remark, what I try to achieve as well is, there's a fundamental difference between how we basically handled our content aggregation traditionally and how we need to handle that aggregation business going forward. For me, the elementary difference is there's not much of a projection to be made which app. I'm not talking about, let's say, the big 5 or the big 10, but I think that the interesting thing in personalizing your TV experience is also in that niche category. From an operator perspective, you can't make big bets. You basically need to have one generic platform in place that actually just enables the market, right, to simply define whatever they want to watch. So it's a much more dynamic play. Now, as I said, the usage of open source components is key. We don't want to own it. The industry needs to adopt it.
I mean, it seems to me that, in this discussion about super aggregation, there are these guys, there are the legacy operators. There's also the device guys who have come in, the Rokus, the Apples, etc. And then you can also aggregate at the level of an app and be, an Amazon channels, a Roku channel, etc., etc. Do you think the operator experience for the viewer and for the content owner stacks up in comparison to the newer aggregators?
Well, I mean, we do a little bit of everything. We have fast channels, we have channels on Amazon Prime, we have traditional linear pay TV channels that are where we're carried in the bundle and paid on a CPS basis. We have linear channels that are retailed a la carte on traditional operators. We do a little bit of everything. I mean, I think that it's interesting in this discussion to say, bogey what TalkTalk's doing against KPN, coming in much more from a network operator type of perspective, where it's much easier for you to do everything virtually. I think the legacy pay TV operators, especially where you have a really big installed base, this is where I agree with what Thijs is saying, because that's a big job of work to go and collect every goddamn legacy set-top box in every consumer household and swap that out for something better. That is a long job. And so what Metrological is doing enables the legacy pay TV operators who are coming more from that perspective and have perhaps gone into triple play or quad play, as that's been their diversification, enables a real sort of leapfrogging there. I mean, I think it just, as I said, there's, excuse the pun, but horses for courses, and there are different parts of the consumer base, there are different cohorts, and I think there clearly, as we were seeing earlier from Maria, there is still a really solid base of households that continue to subscribe to pay TV services, and so that's a base that needs to be served one way or another.
Alessandro and Asanga, both of you, how important do you think the set-top box is going to be to delivering your user experience going forward? Is it going to be phased out? Are you going to offer your services through the devices, through other consumer experiences?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so I think we'll have been talking about the death of the set-top box for many years, and it's still there. So I think it will still remain there for quite some years to go. At the same time, we also see also a rise in other type of devices. So we are also delivering our service on other devices, such as smart TVs, Chromecast, etc. So at the end of the day, it's about consumer choice. So the set-top box remains our main device. It's the device we can control, where we can, as I said before, warranty the service we deliver to the customer. And on top of that, we provide our services on other devices as a complement to the set-top box. I see, for instance, myself, I use it in the bedroom. I prefer to have a TV without a set-top box, so there I watch the service on the smart TV. But in the living room, I have the set-top box, which provides a premium experience for the customer. So I think it's not the one or the other. It's not the set-top box or other devices. I think the set-top box will still be there it has been there, and it will still exist, so it will not die out. At the same time, there are other devices coming up to experience the TV service, and we are onboarding them as well.
Asanga, you guys just announced a new set-top box, right, with NetJam and a 4K experience. So you're obviously really bought into the set-top box experience.
I'd say the set-top box remains very relevant for a large cohort of our customer base. I think over time we see the set-top box actually having more and more relevance in a connected home ecosystem. You know, given that it could be deemed almost like an entertainment hub. I think that you're right. In parallel, there are going to be increasing cohorts of customers who are happy to bring their own device. And I think the bundle we did with Netflix is an example of a boxless proposition. You know, you don't need to have one of our set-tops to take that bundle. So I agree with you that there's room for the set-top box for customers that value it, and I think the 4K launch we did, I think, was very important to democratize, great picture quality, easy to navigate experiences. But at the same time, certain customers are quite happy to consume content their way, and then we can add value through billing, support, and a great overall bundle. So there's room for both in our view.
So you mentioned the B word, the bundle word. How important do you think that is going to be for operators to remain, the key gateway to the customer relationship?
I'd answer that in two parts. I think the bundle will be important for some customers, particularly when they're sort of shopping around in the market and they're looking to make savings. I think there's considerable value if you look at the cost of the broadband component and the video component, and you put that together into a compelling bundle. For sure, for many segments, I think of customers, I think there'll be lots of value. For some customers, the bundle may not be as relevant, actually. You may want to start your journey with a provider with, broadband that just works, Wi-Fi that's brilliant, and we've certainly done that with our launch of our ultra-fast services, and we've powered our Wi-Fi with Amazon Aero. And then over a customer life cycle, they may then elect to take more services, video services with us. And again, we're ready to serve the customer when they're ready. So I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all bundle approach. I think it's more around giving customers the flexibility they need and helping them during the life cycle. So definitely not bundles must be adhered to. In fact, in many ways, we hope to break the conventional bundle with our strategy. Breaking the bundle for us means giving the customers the basics with the connectivity and then allowing them to build their own package.
Thijs, across all of the customers you're dealing with, what's the pattern you're seeing in terms of bundling by operators?
Yeah, I think again, I'm a little bit scared now to mention numbers, right? Because you'll jump on me and ask me to explain it. So let me do a second try, and if not, then
go on.
Okay,
throw out some numbers.
Good. So 69% of the households actually prefers that one bill. And it's maybe a strange way to just start my reply to you, but I think fundamentally, the end consumer simply wants to have, you know, a sort of a personalized screen, one remote, one bill, and one personalized UI. So I would actually say, to me, that's a very important guideline in where you need to take it through. And of course, right, like Asanga said, there's definitely different, you know, age groups and demographic groups that have different preferences. So I would actually say take an agnostic approach. But in essence, right, you know, many people struggle with having all those multiple subscriptions and said, I'm not going to go off to a discussion where's the big streamers versus the pay TV operator. But the point is a little bit that eventually you need to go to a certain, you know, situation where we need to acknowledge that the end consumer simply wants to be in a position where they simply get served whatever they want without too many hassle and without pulling their credit cards or, you know, switching different remotes, etc. So for me, bundling makes sense. I guess the only condition to this, or prerequisite if you like, is, you know, in order to make that work, you have a lot of work to do behind the screens, right? Because you have to enable all those content providers to put that content onto your platform. Because if you want to put everything behind one remote, yeah, you definitely need to make some bold decisions on how you do that.
Heather, there's I mean, that's the B word. The D word is data that you mentioned, and having your own data and access to that data, the relationship data. Is that a challenge? Is that a growing challenge for you?
What, having the data or not having the data?
Yeah, getting access to it, keeping access to it, having deals that help you retain access to the data.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely a big give up there when you're working with a partner, particularly if it's an in-app purchase type of situation. I mean, the thing that is becoming more and more interesting for us is firstly, you have to bear in mind that the landscape for identifying and tracking audiences and doing last click attribution on social media and that type of digital marketing is changing rapidly post iOS 14, and so first party data becomes much, much more important for anybody who's got any kind of direct to consumer relationship. We do benefit from a lot of kind of industry affiliations with different membership organizations that gives us by proxy access to first party data. But the other kind of data that is super valuable for us, because believe it or not, we actually serve a very kind of diverse group of people with lots of different, you know, micro specialist interests, is really understanding people's behavior. So are they people who want to dip in and just watch an event and then dip out again? Are they people who have an abiding interest in some particular area? What is their behavior? Because that then enables you to engage with those people in a much more meaningful fashion, to use predictive analytics to identify people who are a churn risk, and to communicate with them in just a much higher touch and much higher value way.
Yep.
So, I mean, I suppose if I had any kind of recommendation to make to my friends here and co-panelists, it would be to see if it's possible to facilitate some degree of transparency or engagement with the audience on behalf of the content provider, because I think that actually can only benefit everybody in the end, the consumer, the content provider, and also by increasing levels of engagement and stickiness, the operator partner as well.
So how about it, Alessandra?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's also in the interest of at the end of the consumer himself or herself, because data is crucial for super aggregation, for enabling a great user experience, to present the content to the user he or she wants to enjoy at the moment. Yeah, so I mean, together with I think it was mentioned earlier this morning, metadata. So I mean, any data that is being related to content and consumption is really useful, and it needs to be aggregated in the platform in order to provide a great user interface.
I'm going to ask Asanga to comment on that as well, but just before he does, I want questions from the floor here. So please stick your hand up while he's answering that point on addressing Heather's wish. Asanga.
Yeah, my own personal view is I think we need to help, customers understand, what they're sharing in terms of their data and be more transparent, and think about how we use data to assist customers in finding the content they like, but at the same time making sure that they understand the implications of that data sharing. So I think it's
not about knowing that it's Bob Nurk at
Yeah.
such and such an address. It can all be anonymized, but
Yeah.
it is about actually communicating. I mean, we do work quite actively with our operator partners to let them know what we have coming up in our schedule, what sort of promotable events or content events that we have. And this, I think, is beneficial for everybody. But if we could also have a bit of a return path, as I say, even on an anonymized basis to understand people's behavior, I think that would be hugely beneficial.
Questions? Comments?
Hi, Inak from Access Orca. So I have a question. We are all talking about the same things. So how, as a pay TV operator, you actually differentiate yourself from the competition? Because everyone are talking about super aggregation. We are all talking about the unified search and all these things. And a lot of the things are not really in the hands of control by the operator, because it also depends on the type of agreements that you have with the OTTs. And basically, how do you differentiate between you and the competition? So that's my question. Thank you.
I think that's a great point. And, especially if you're all offering the same apps, right? What's the differentiating point?
I mean, perhaps I've asked it. I think it depends on, your positioning in the market as an operator, right? So I think it does help if you, in our case, I think we very, very clearly, obsess around being our leading value provider. So for us, not only do we need to make the discovery and consumption of content, accessible and affordable, we also look for that to be in a household bill to be, absolutely, a leading value position. So I think for each operator, I would imagine it's very much around understanding, where do you play, what are your strengths, what are you trying to deliver to your customer segments, and then tailoring your offering. But I think if there's one message, I think in many cases, how a pay TV operator remains relevant is being relevant to a customer throughout their connectivity and entertainment experience and tying those two worlds together. So in our case, it's definitely giving customers incredible value for money and getting the basics right.
Yeah, so it's I fully agree. So it's about the total customer engagement. So it's about providing a service to the user. Also, depending on the provider, one is more oriented to a specific segment of users, maybe. So as a consumer, you should look and discover what's the service that fits better your consumer group. And in the end, it's about if you are engaged with an operator and you have a great experience, if the operator is assisting you, if you are having problems with your set-top box or with your connection and you are being assisted properly, I think that has the biggest value for the customer, that you are being helped at. I have I can tell from experience of myself, you can buy a certain device and it was top of the range, and after 3-4 years it's not working anymore, or not all the apps are working, and who are you calling? So that, I would say, that's the value of an operator, is to the engagement with the consumer along the whole journey.
Yeah, that's a great point actually. I think that end-to-end support is actually a very important theme for many of us in the room. If you're in the middle of watching your favourite show, and for some reason it goes down. Certainly in my household, it's a really bad situation. It has to be remedied very quickly. And so having the support of an operator to troubleshoot it, because naturally customers will think that it's a problem with the broadband. Well, might be a problem with the broadband, might be a problem with your Wi-Fi, might be a problem with the end service. I think operators have a an opportunity to really support the customer in quickly getting to the root cause of what's wrong. And again, I think that's adding value versus, customers, as you say, supporting themselves with devices of different ages. But again, I think the philosophy should be some customers will be perfectly happy to serve themselves with their own devices and direct relationships, and that's absolutely fine.
Yeah,
Other customers will need support.
Yeah, in the end, it depends on the customer segment, of course, as we said before. So some customers are perfectly happy with a device. They are more maybe the tech savvy. They want to solve everything themselves. But we see that most of the customers they really value the assistance from an operator, from a pay TV provider.
Question there.
Going back to Heather's point, if the pay TV operators here could really justify why they won't share their data, because I think Heather makes a really good point that it is beneficial to everybody, but everybody holds on to their data. Nobody wants to share it these days, and let's really get into the crux of why you won't share it, please.
Thank you.
I think it's interesting for us because we've just made the pivot. So over to working with OTT providers versus the original linear TV model. So I'd say that for us as an operator, we're in the early days of getting the customer basics right, and then figuring out who do we partner with beyond our initial partners. I think it comes back down to a pragmatism around, not necessarily in our case being wedded to anything in particular. It's more a pragmatism around who are we going to bring on board that delivers customers the choice they want and the experiences they want, and then having an open conversation about data. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule, but we're at the early stage of making that pivot. So welcome the conversation and the dialogue.
Do you have a view, Tess?
Yeah, I think when you see basically the focus shifting to super aggregation, I guess we also need to reinvent, to some extent, let's say, the relation between the content providers and the operators. Meaning that at the end of the day, I guess by just organize yourself, as a partnership is basically the only way to win. And definitely data is a crucial subject. I think from an operator perspective, you just want one unified way of treating your data, because there's a bit of a difference of interest, right? On the content provider side, you would like to just kind of go into your own, let's say, your app experience, your app silo, you try to optimize it. And from an operator perspective, you want to have that overall abstraction, right? Because your interest is, at the end of the day, that consumer gets all the content he wants, not necessarily, horse and country or whatever other app we are referring to. So I think that the challenge here is a bit that we need to build bridges, right? We're not competitors. We simply need to kind of leverage each other's positions, and I guess that's kind of settling into that new reality. It needs to be a little bit of give and take, I'm afraid.
You happy with that, Heather?
Well, I remember, and as someone who's worked for us for quite a long time as an agent, pulls a quote from Finding Nemo in describing the relationship between content providers and operators, that sometimes the operators need to be reminded that the content providers are friend, not food. So yes, I'm happy with that, thank you.
That's a great quote to finish on, because you mentioned food and it happens to be lunchtime. So thank you to a great panel.